Welcome, everybody. I really appreciate you all coming out this evening to spend this time with us. Dr. Dan Saferstein is a licensed psychologist who has his practice in Ann Arbor. He works with individual athletes, teams, coaches, athletic departments, parents. He works with the USA national hockey teams, Olympians, and most recently NHL players. Many moons ago, Dan's kids and our kids, my kids, played soccer together, and I got to know Dan. So he's a friend, he's a fellow parent. He's also an author, of which he has some books here if you have interest after. He's also a painter. So with all that being said, let's welcome a man of many talents, Dr. Dan Saferstein.
Sue, I'm going to rig this up here. Hold on one second. Yeah, I knew Sue, I think when I wrote the first book, and one of my motivations for writing that book was a guide to sports parenting, is that soccer was becoming so expensive. We were having to travel all over, getting, all over the country. So I thought it'd be good to kind of write a book and see. My goal was to have it pay for my kids' soccer expenses, and it did. So I'm very grateful for that. Sue asked me to come up with a title for this talk. First, it was just going to be a talk, and I kind of came up with this idea of fun over fear, and at the time it seemed kind of like it had a good sound to it. And I thought about it afterwards, and thought about it actually this morning, and it may be a little too simplistic to say just play for fun, I think of fun as just something that's not as organized. I think of fun as something that doesn't involve as much travel, maybe, that isn't, as expensive, where the stakes are a little lower. But as your kids grow up and get a little, start playing at a higher level, it's not just about fun. Maybe it's, how could I say, do you remember, I don't know, when I was a kid, we used to watch cartoons on Saturday morning. That was a big deal. I don't know if kids watch cartoons, but there used to often be some form of a cartoon where there'd be a cartoon character and there'd be like a devil and an angel, talking in the cartoon character's ear. And sports is a little like that. And the angel is love, and the devil is fear. And most every moment in sports is like a choice between love and fear. Love for your sport, love for the challenge of competing, and fear of what could happen if the competition doesn't go well. So often when I work with young athletes, it's somehow teaching them, retraining their minds to love the challenge, to love the competition, to actually look forward to playing a difficult team versus hoping that it's an easy game. So, often, how could I, sports is a very challenging environment, In some ways, it's a little more challenging psychologically than school is. In school, our failures and our successes are a little more private. In sports, there's scoreboards, there's records, and it becomes public for both, the parent and the child. If your son doesn't do so well on a math quiz, you never have to kind of explain it to anyone. But if your son or daughter's a goalie and he or she lets in an easy goal, you kind of feel like, you almost have to apologize, I was the father of a goalie, so I kind of know what that's like. Sports brings out a lot of intense feelings. You know, in some ways it has almost a religious quality to it, at least in our culture. You know, kids go to church or synagogue and they don't experience the joys often or the letdowns that they do when they actually play in a sporting event. And, you know, that's the same is true, you know, for the parents. It just brings out a lot of very intense feelings, and it also brings out the opportunity to learn a lot, you know, about forgiveness, about compassion, about, you know, getting over disappointment and moving on. Oh, excuse me. You know, as parents, I know when I was a parent, you kind of start off and you kind of think almost that your job is to make your kids comfortable, you know, and so you try and get a comfortable car and a comfortable house and get them comfortable shoes, and then you put them in competitive sports, and it's about being uncomfortable at times. And it's a challenge as a parent to kind of see your kid struggling and to have faith, you know, that they have the inner resources to kind of deal with this struggle. You know, most parents I think are pretty good about that in school. It seems like it's easier being a school parent. You see your kid kind of dealing with a difficult math problem and you don't freak out. You kind of have faith that they'll be able to, you know, come to the right answer. You don't, you know, scream at them to do this or do that. But it's a little different in sports, you know. Sports can kind of get us almost a little drunk at times. You know, it takes, you know, when it comes to seeing a child kind of struggling, you know, during a season, it takes a tremendous amount of patience as a parent, you know, you don't want to like overreact. You don't want to take it game by game. You know, you want to almost take it season by season. You want to let the season unfold, see what your child can learn, and then you make decisions after the season, you know, if this is the right place for your child. As a parent, you have permission, not my permission, but you can feel anything you want as a parent when you're watching your child play. You know, you just can't act the way you want, you know. You know, you can feel upset, you can feel that, you know, why is this other kid playing more than my kid? You know, why isn't my kid in at the end of the game? But you just have to kind of keep it to yourself sometimes, you know. There's a Buddhist saying, I think, whenever you speak, make sure it's an improvement upon silence, you know. And that can be a useful thing to remember when you're driving home from a game, you know, particularly after a loss, you know, that you know, sometimes you just got to let it go, you know. It's important, particularly as your child starts getting a little older, you know, to let them fight some of their own battles. You know, if your child is, you know, 6 or 7, it's different than when they're 14 or 15. You know, a 15-year-old child can have a relationship with a coach where he or she can talk to the coach, kind of find out what areas do I need to work on. You can ask the coach, you know, well, how come I'm not playing more? Like, what do I need to do, you know, to get more playing time? And that type of dialogue is kind of, that helps in the maturation process. There's a time, you know, fast forwarding 10 years where your child may need to talk to his or her boss. And so it sets the stage. You don't need to jump in and rescue them and do it for them. So, you know, it's this idea that you want to treat your kids differently as they get older than you do when they're younger. And the idea is you want to nurture independence. So anything they can do for themselves, you don't want to do for them. And that can include packing their soccer bag and making sure they have enough water and, you know, little things like that. So by the time they reach college age, you know, they can fend for themselves a little. I remember my son plays for University of California at Santa Barbara, and when their freshmen don't live in the dorm, you know, they want them to be kind of more isolated in these apartments, and I dropped my son off at college, and he said, how do you turn on a stove? And it made me think, well, maybe I didn't do such a good job in terms of teaching independence. There's, and particularly, my back was turned when people were raising hand about soccer, and how many soccer parents were there? So there's a lot of soccer parents. There's a difference between unfairness and subjectivity, and this is a real important thing to understand as a parent in a sport like soccer or football versus a sport like tennis or track and swimming, where the better athletes, they have some data. They can say, I'm faster. It's different in soccer, and so sometimes a coach has to make a decision about two players, and maybe both players, can do the job. And for whatever reason, the coach may pick up someone who's not your child, and that's, a challenge. But it's not necessarily that it's unfair. It's just that a coach has to make a decision, And this isn't to say, that there isn't unfairness in sports. There is. But if you kind of go back to that learning mile where sports is an opportunity for kids to learn stuff, that I guess learning to deal with unfairness, is a useful lesson. I remember my daughter, who played travel softball, she tried out for some elite team, and I can't remember if she got an email or a phone call that she made the team, and she was like so elated, and she called all her friends, and 2 days later they said they made a mistake, and that it kind of was unfair, but it's, I didn't call and complain. What's the point of complaining? You don't want your kid to be on a team where they're not really wanted. But that was a tough lesson for her, and I'm proud that she's a tough little kid, who's little but not so young. She's 24 now. It's tempting to give advice to your kids, I think we like giving advice, but as your kid gets older, you have to be mindful that they may not like hearing advice as much as you like giving it, And so, I would go easy with the advice, particularly if they're not asking for it, and particularly, if they're kind of young adolescents. You don't want to, kids know when they make mistakes, and so you don't necessarily need to try and, give them advice to make them better soccer players. One coach told me asking a kid why he or she made a mistake is like asking them why they're not more talented. It's, the more talented you are, you usually make fewer mistakes, like you have, your range is higher. I would also go easy with praise too, and that may seem like, how can you praise your kid too much? But I think you can, you can praise them in a way that doesn't help them realistically assess who they are as young athletes. I remember I work, as Sue said, I work with the National Team Development Program, and I can remember one dad would just, constantly tell his kid just that he has Hall of Fame potential. It'd be enough if he said he had NHL potential, but to, tell a 17-year-old kid he has Hall of Fame potential when he wasn't even starting, or wasn't even on the first or second line, that, he meant well, I'm sure. He wanted to tell his kid he believed in him, but, it ends up becoming a burden, to have to carry around your parents' expectations, and sometimes it just gives the message that it's really important to me as a parent that you be a great player if you keep saying how great you are. So, if Knox is here, he would probably like this next point, and that's let your coaches do their jobs. Coaching's kind of what's it like? It's like house painting in a sense. Like everyone thinks they can paint like a house, you know, but there is, you know, there is some skill. If you ever try to paint your own house, you know, there's some skill to it, and you have to kind of trust that your coaches can do their job. You know, if you don't think they can do your job, then when the season's over, you can find coaches you think that would be a better fit for your son. But while the season's going on, you know, it doesn't help to kind of second guess your coach, particularly in front of your child. You know, when you lose, it doesn't help to tell your kid what you think the coach should have done so that you would win. You know, it's good to kind of be a good role model for your kids when it comes to respect and when it comes to team loyalty. If anyone has, also while I'm talking, if anyone, like if a question just jumps into their head, you know, feel free to ask it or raise your hand. I think it makes it more energizing for it to be interactive. Or we can wait to the end and do that. You know, another point, I think I mentioned this in one of my books, is to kind of forget about scholarships for a while. You know, that, I don't know in this club if that, you know, I work with a lot of clubs, and some of them that's kind of like the main incentive. You know, they get their kids in this club because they think it's kind of the pipeline to college soccer, or, you know, if your kid's in another sport, you know, college football or baseball. But it's not a good idea to like invest in your kid almost like they're a stock and you're expecting a certain yield on your investment, because you'd be better off just saving your money. And you know, you invest in the experience because it's a good experience, you know, not because it's necessarily going to lead anywhere, because you really, you know, you don't know where it's going to lead, and when it comes to the amount of money that most kids get on a scholarship, you know, it's not as glamorous as you think, you know. You kind of have to, I guess, just if you think your kid's talented, you just have to trust that things will end up, you know, wherever their talent takes them, and you don't want to, you know, as your kid gets older, you know, that this whole recruiting thing can just drive you crazy if you try and control the process. You know, even just listening to Michigan football, you know, they're recruiting. They'll give 100 offers for 25 spots. You know, they cast a wide net, and you know, college programs kind of do the same. They, as one coach said, it's kind of a dirty business. You know, so I guess, you know, the flip side of forgetting about scholarships for a while is kind of appreciating what's going on right now. You know, whatever age your kid is, whatever talent level they're at, there's plenty that can be appreciated, you know. And I think it's just a bad habit for always waiting for things to kind of get better before you appreciate them, waiting for them to, you know, play at a higher level. And, you know, I think there's a lot of good that goes on here, and if I were you, I would hold off traveling to some higher level club for as long as you can. You know, just stay close and learn what you can, you know, close to home. If you're someone that gets frustrated easily as a sports parent, and you're not alone, you know, if you are, is that I would take a kind of a quick review of your own athletic history. You know, kind of, you know, ask yourself, you know, how good were you as an athlete? How good did you want to be? You know, what coaches and what adults, you know, brought out the best in you? Who brought out the worst in you? It's just good to kind of almost revisit, like, who you were as a young athlete, because then it kind of sheds some light on, you know, how you approach your child's athletic experience, you know. You know, in my sports parenting book, there's a little chapter about finding your own glory, you know, and these are real little chapters, but you know, just the idea that it's natural to identify with your child, and it's natural to kind of like enjoy their success, but you kind of want to make sure that you're making it about them, you know. It's easy for parents to get, I don't know, drunk on the idea that they have an elite child, you know, and that's kind of a lot what drives the, you know, the youth sports industry. They get everyone to fly all over the country for these different events because they, you know, they call them elite, you know, so everyone, you know, feels elite, you know, but I don't know, I think elitism's overrated, yeah. What else can we talk about here? I think it's also important, you know, as a sports parent to not make everything about hard work, you know, to not make sports is just a big character issue. It's a myth, you know, that if you work hard enough that you can achieve anything. You know, that doesn't mean if you work hard, you can definitely realize your potential, but everyone has a different potential, and you don't want to make your kid feel bad that they're not more talented than they actually are. You know, because I think a big part of this, you know, sports, I would say sports soccer, but we'll just say youth sports journey is for kids kind of to come to peace with their talents, to come to peace with who they are, you know, to be able to enjoy sports, you know, at a different level. You don't necessarily have to be the best, and you know, kids are, you know, you don't want to feel that it's just all about hard work, because, you know, it's not, the same is true in math too. You know, some people are blessed with better math genes, and some people are blessed with better sports genes. You know, the concept of letting go of your child as they get older is very challenging, and it's you know, I know for me, like, there was a time where I just almost made a conscious switch that I was going to try to enjoy them instead of trying to help make them better, and it was, I think, a great thing for me, and you know, it was great, you know, I think for my kids too. I enjoyed the whole thing. It wasn't so stressful. You know, I remember Lou Holtz. He's a former college football coach who had a reputation of being a great motivator, and someone once asked him, like, so how do you motivate your players? And he said, I don't try and motivate them. I just try not to screw it up. They already come to me motivated. And I think that's true of sports parenting. You know, you may have to motivate your kid to cut the lawn, you know, but, you know, I don't think you necessarily have to motivate them to play soccer. It's a really fun game, you know, and so, but, you know, I think you can keep it fun, you can keep it light, you can keep a sense of humor, you know, at any level. You know, you see some of the, I don't know, the greatest pros on TV, and they're laughing and they're having fun, and they're competing tenaciously, but, you know, it's not like life and death, you know. You know, I know, you know, that's a big challenge working with some of the hockey players I work with, you know, because they're always, you know, the young kids before the NHL draft, their draft stock gets printed out like maybe quarterly, and so they're always stressing out about where they think they're going to be drafted, and, you know, it's a challenge to kind of get them to switch from an auditioning mindset to one of just learning and just playing and just having fun. When I used to work at a camp, you know, I remember the director of the camp would kind of say at the beginning of camp, he would say, you know, camp is for campers, you know, and he knew from experience that a lot of these college kids like myself, we'd want to just go to camp and have fun, you know, ourselves, you know, but it was really about, you know, helping the campers to have fun. And I think the same message with being a sports parent is that the sports is for the kids. You know, you have to almost put their needs first and not kind of make it about you. And that's kind of it takes a certain maturity, and sometimes it takes a little acting that you need to learn to kind of, you know, when you're disappointed, that you can share it with a fellow adult, you know, but you can't always share all your disappointments with your own kids. Another thought is that, question? Hi.
How do you balance coaches screaming at the kids? And my kids don't play soccer, so I don't know if there's any coaches or not.
Okay.
But the coaches screaming at them for making a bad play or missing something, and then keeping it light and fun. Like, how do you try and balance that as the kids get more serious?
Well, some coaches, it depends. If a coach is just a screamer, that's just the way they talk. Because there are coaches like that. They just like scream. That's just what they do. You kind of want your child to learn to almost be a little thick-skinned, to just kind of have it go one ear out the other. If a coach is constantly criticizing a kid for mistakes, that's another thing. That's not good coaching. It should be, I think, 2/3 praise, 1/3 criticism. But you can't always handpick your coaches, just like you can't handpick your teachers in school. And great coaches, are probably as rare as great teachers. So your kid may get a couple great coaches, some good ones, and maybe one bad one. And can I ask how old your child is?
The one I think is like 14, almost 14.
Okay, so it's a little different. Like if your child was maybe 8 or 9, and all of a sudden you see this coach is somehow, I don't know, spoiling their love for the game, and that to you seems like, that's a pretty sad thing. That it may be unfair to expect an 8 or 9-year-old to talk to a coach, and so you may need to email a coach and set up a meeting and say, this is my child's experience. Their love for their sport seems to be dwindling, and they're afraid to make a mistake. Because you don't want kids to be like in hockey. We teach our kids, you're always going to make mistakes. You can't not make mistakes. So you're either going to make 2 kinds of mistakes. You're going to make an overly aggressive mistake or an overly cautious mistake. And most coaches think it's better for development to make an overly aggressive mistake. And so that's the kind, you want kids to take risks and try and make great plays and not just try to avoid making bad plays. And so a coach that's constantly screaming when you make a mistake makes a kid very tentative. And it makes a kid keep looking over to the sideline and looking to the coach to make sure, am I doing a good job? Versus kind of having an intuitive sense of the game, that you want to be able to think on the field, and not keep looking to your parents or looking to coaches for approval. I liked your question. In tennis, I was kind of a counter-puncher, meaning that, and I'm the same way I think as a speaker. When people kind of throw something at me, I find it stimulating. So, where was I? One way to take the pressure off sports, and your kids might not like me saying this, is to put more emphasis on their schoolwork. It's so easy to get so much more excited about them scoring a goal than it is about, them doing well, in a history exam. I think sports is more fun. I was the athletic liaison in our family. My wife was the educational, and she went to all the, parent meetings and stuff like that, and I made sure to get them to, Chicago for a soccer game and stuff. But as I got older and my kids got older, I consciously, started getting more involved in their school, just showing an interest and making it out to be a bigger deal, because it really is the bigger deal. It is their, in the music industry they say don't quit your day job, but this is their day job, being students. And what, yeah?
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I
I
like
just
being
have
interrupted.
it's more of a curious question, and it might not be something that you necessarily know the answer to. But it kind of goes back to the pressure on the children.
Yeah.
For playing sports. When I was a kid, I grew up playing soccer. I'm in my early 40s, so 30 years ago, there wasn't travel soccer.
Yeah.
And you just played the whatever. I grew up in Dearborn. You just played on the team in Dearborn, and you made the high school soccer team if you played regular soccer, right? Now, it's almost like unless you are on travel soccer, which is a lot of money, you don't make the high school soccer team. Were other sports back then, 30 years ago, did they have travel baseball and travel different things where parents were paying more money for the kids for those sports? It's just soccer was different? Or have all sports changed to where in order to play in schools now, you have to play travel or you're not gonna make the team?
Youth sports became more of an industry. That changed everything. People earn their money through youth sports. They earn their money coaching sports. They earn their living organizing tournaments, and it becomes a big business. So you tell your child, oh, it's just a game, it doesn't matter. But his coach, is a professional coach. His reputation is based on how many, state cups he wins or how many national champions. So, kids are smart enough that they know that, that there's something at stake here. It's, that's when I said fun may not do justice to the whole concept. So when it became an industry, I think it changed. Everyone wants their kid to play only their sport. So if you're a soccer coach, you want your kid to play soccer year round. Is it necessary? I don't know. If you're maybe for world-class development it is, but I have a feeling that athletic ability kind of takes you to where you're meant to go, with adequate training. So I don't think, if you, I work with the Wolves Academy, those kids, and, there's kids occasionally that want to play basketball, so we had a kid that played football, in the fall, and so they take off, and, does it make them any worse? Probably not,
I guess my point is the pressure to make it, because if you grew up playing sports, it was a big part of your life.
Yeah.
And for me it was, and it's like I want my kids to be able to play high school sports, but unless they're in these travel programs, they might not make it. So it's
Yeah, well, they may not make it even if they are in the travel program. So I wouldn't, if they like the travel program, if that's like a fun experience to be in the travel program, I would have them be in it. If they're being in it so that they can make a high school team years down the road, I don't think so, Yes?
Just to speak to her point too, I think that whatever has happened is eliminating the multi-sport athlete.
Yeah.
We'll no longer have kids at varsity ladder in 4 or 5 different sports.
Right.
There will be 1 or 2 sports that they play and they make the team, but we'll no longer have these multi-sport athletes that we were growing up.
And it becomes also a matter of time, like as a family, as a young athlete, my kids could have played varsity basketball, my sons could have played varsity basketball easy, but, they played travel basketball at one point and travel soccer, and I said, I can't do this. I don't want to spend my summers in Flint in some musty gym, and so, we made a rule, you get 1 travel sport, and they played travel soccer, and then they played, middle school basketball, and then they could have done high school basketball and travel soccer probably, but then your kids are just running ragged, and they're just sleep deprived,
So how can we change the expectations of the leagues and the associations that offer travel about the multi-sport athlete? Because you're expected to play a certain sport a whole year instead of go from football season to tennis season to basketball or volleyball and go on from season to season. How do we alter those expectations? Because if you're not playing travel soccer, for example, 12 months a year, you're behind again. Going back to where do you go? That's
Yeah, no, it's hard.
How do you alter the expectations of the associations?
Well, that I don't want to say anything that steps on Sue's toes, so, that is you know, I guess, you know, if there were enough parents like you, that there would be something on the soccer menu where kids could play seasonal soccer. You know, like there used to be in Ann Arbor something called Rec and Ed.
We have
Yeah.
SASA rec program still.
Yeah, so there is that, but then the problem, like with your kid, is they go, well, I don't want to play in that. All the good players play in this, you know, and then it becomes like a challenge to, you know, find the happy medium. You know, like if your kid's a good athlete, they can pull it off. You know, because this is the prejudice coaches have. Most coaches have. They have a prejudice to winning. You know, so if your kid is gifted enough where he or she could help their team win, they make accommodations. If your kid's not, they don't make accommodations. So it's like there's favoritism, you know. But, you know, I guess another thing sometimes is that kids can play some sports, not just at a travel level, but they can play organized sports, and they can play some sports on their own, which is kind of, you know, what we did, you know, in my era. You know, my kids, you know, I played tennis at Michigan in college, and they were around tennis, and they could have been tennis players, you know, but they decided just to pick up rackets and go to the park in the summer and play with their friends. And, you know, I remember one of them, you know, Adam, who's a good athlete, he said, I want to play in this tennis tournament. There was like the city tennis tournament. I go, what do you mean? You know, he goes, well, I'll play for a few weeks. And, you know, I go, no, you don't understand. That's not how it works. And these kids play 5-6 days a week since they were 4 years old. And he goes, you watch. So he went out and trained for 3 weeks for the Ann Arbor City tournament. He went out and played some kid, you know, who had like 6 rackets. And you know, and he went out there in his, like, you know, Allen Iverson high top tennis, and he won. He just kept running. So that was his tennis experience. And, you know, it's weird. I played pickup basketball for many years with a bunch of guys who all played college sports. You know, we had a gym in Ann Arbor, and none of them still played the same sport they played in college. And it's something to kind of keep in mind with your kids, is when their sport becomes a job, you know, like if they're playing travel soccer or whatever, or swimming, you know, it almost like they don't think of it as fun. And then when they turn 16, 17, 18, they don't want anything to do with it anymore. So, like, my feeling is, you know, he or she who plays their sport the longest wins. You know, so if, you know, you don't want to make it like so heavy and so serious that when the time comes for them to leave, they never want to go back to it again. So
I have trouble with this question when one of my children asks it. It's how did I do it when it wasn't good, or when it, you know, I usually answer with, how do you think you did?
yeah,
So, but it's troubling. I don't know what to say.
yeah,
It's without being overly critical,
Right.
critical at all, really, or not lying and saying it was great.
yeah. Well, do they know? Do you think?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you could say you sucked, you know. But I love you anyway. You know, you can always frame it within them, like it probably wasn't your best. You know, like if you compare how they played with other kids, that's kind of not the best path to go down, because if they're always worse than other kids, you're going to always say, you know, so you do it within them, and you can always ask, like, you know, do you know how you played, or why are you asking me? Like, do they want your approval? Or I kind of had a sense of humor with my kids, you know, like when I said, you know, you sucked, you know, or I mean, maybe I don't know if I would say that, but, you know, but I would always kind of joke around and, talk a little trash with them. And you also can't treat every kid the same. Like you have to learn, like some kids really want to know, and if one kid, like really want to know, I would say, listen, ask your coach, but it seemed like, you were a little tentative or, just a little tidbit,
And what about siblings when it becomes apparent whose skill level is a lot higher?
So, you have two siblings and one kid's better?
Yeah.
It's, can I ask how old these kids are?
12 and almost 14.
Yeah. So they know.
It's not even that they play the same sport, it's just that athletic, there's just one is more athletic.
Right, and it's kind of, if you treat it like this shameful thing, it's just the way it is. They know. So he's better in sports. Maybe, you'll be a better engineer or you'll be better at something else. It's not, we almost treat like not being good in sports as a disease, that, you have to kind of like, it's just matter of fact, so-and-so's better in basketball, does it mean they're a better person? I don't, that's kind of the reference that people draw, that if you're better in soccer, I'll just use soccer, that in some weird way you're a better person. And it sounds stupid to say that, but parents even feel the same way, that if their kid is like an elite, if their kid's the best player on the team or the best player on the state, that somehow that gives them some status as a parent. That like if you have an elite athlete, that means you're an elite parent, so that's pretty cool. And that sounds like a weird kind of rationale, but it's true. And then what is a blow to parents is like they go to some tournament and they go, oh my God, there's kids those parents have even more elite kids than our kids, and then it's like, depressing. So, I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, it's that they both enjoy it the same.
Yeah.
And I don't even know one problem because everything comes easier.
Right, and that's life. That some things, some people, life is harder for some people than others. And that is true. And it's true in sports and it's true in school. That some kids don't have to study and they get A's, and other kids bust their butt and they barely, they get C's and B's. So it's you just have to make the best with what you're given, and not, the tendency is kids who are not as gifted in sports quit, when they become 12, 13, 14, so there's, fewer kids participating because they don't want to not be good at something, So it's a challenge. If your kid's not great, can they still get something out of it, without having to, without being a status thing, with it just being like, I like swimming. I like that feeling of gliding across the water, I don't glide, but, for people who do glide across the water, it's a pretty cool feeling. Do you have to qualify for states or anything like that, I don't know. Any other thoughts or questions, or I don't know, getting back to this thing here. One coach, a college coach, I once gave him this advice, and it made me think that it has implications as a parent, is I told him to try and feel on the sidelines whatever he wanted his players to feel on the field. And if you want to do something to feel like you're helping your kid, that can be a very useful kind of exercise, that if you want them to be confident, if you want them to be composed, if you want them to be calm, if you want them to be patient, to see if you can feel that, And see if you can feel that in the car on the way, to the practice or the game, because it's contagious. Without you saying a word, your kids kind of they absorb your spirit, your spirit about competition, your spirit about life, and I don't know, it's a very powerful thing just to kind of try and feel calm. It seems pretty simple, but it's easier said than done. And the flip side of that would just be looking like a nervous wreck. Pacing the sidelines, or standing with your arms folded, or kind of covering your face like when someone strikes out or misses a scoring opportunity. And don't rush. If you can, the most simplest thing is a sports parent is to try not to rush places. That energy of rushing, of being late. The only tickets I've ever gotten in my life have been like going to soccer tournaments, like in Indiana and Ohio. Like they're just like waiting for me. And the only car accident I've ever gotten in my life, one car accident, was hurrying to get to a practice. And thankfully, that Honda car protected us very well. But no, it's in addition to working with athletes, another gig I have is I work 10 hours a week in palliative care at the VA Medical Center. I don't know if you knew that, but so essentially I work with people who are dying. So for me, like when I work with athletes, no matter how good or how bad they are, there's something just so uplifting and inspiring. Like these young, healthy people who are so full of life. And I remember I worked with an 8-year-old, this past summer, a baseball player who loved baseball so much, but would get so nervous to the point where his stomach would hurt. And we, somehow we were able to get at his fears, and he was able to kind of give his fears to me. I told him I would look after them for a while he went and played. And I told him that, and I meant this so sincerely, that I enjoyed working with him as much as I would enjoy working with one of the Tigers. And it really was true. And it's kind of hard to appreciate all that's going on with your kids now, because, you want to help them and you want to, do all you can, to help them be successful. But, I don't know, there's a lot of cool stuff going on now, and I would just, savor it. And, the weekends can go slow, but the years go fast, so I would just enjoy that. And every year, kind of at the end of the year, not necessarily in the middle of the year, is kind of check in with yourselves, check in with your spouses, and just look at kind of how sports is affecting your family. Is this bringing out the best in you? Is this the life you want? You don't want to be like a victim of your own lifestyle. You want to, feel like you're choosing it, and it's bringing out the best in everyone. And then you decide, like you said, you want your kid to be able to play more than 2 or 3 or one sport, and so you decide, is that, what should we do? So that's it for the lecture. I feel like I've blabbed enough, I don't know, like I said, if there's any more questions.
What are your thoughts on a child just playing one sport? On social media, you're going to see these articles, a child should not play one sport, a child should not play one sport. I have one kid who's very talented at soccer, and I've been trying to get him to play another sport forever. He doesn't want to.
It's fine to play. I think it's fine to play one sport if it's coming from him. Like if he's in love with one sport, you can kind of, like I say, not signing up for a team, but just kind of in a fun way, hit a few tennis balls or go to a hoop and shoot baskets, or but sometimes a kid fall in love with a sport, and my kid now who just graduated is trying to see if he's good enough to play soccer professionally, either here or overseas. He was like 3 or 4 years old, and he just saw a soccer ball, and it's like wow, and he just got it. Like it was like, oh, this clicked. This is. I remember the first day we had him at some little peewee thing, someone said, "Oh, who's Pele?" You know, I mean, he just fell in love with it, and it's been a good marriage, you know. And my role as his parent, you know, not that I can manage this, is I always felt if he could keep his love for soccer alive, that he'd be fine, you know. And it's just a question of you know, tweaking things and protecting things and not letting it get too serious, and you know, keeping it fun even as it gets in a high level, and you know, there's all these big tournaments and rankings, and yeah. But no, so I don't think it's, you know, you may kind of, you know, if soccer's his thing, you want to have maybe a little breaks from like organized soccer, you know. So like if his season's 10 months, you know, like let him train in the summer, you know, like on his own, or play pickup soccer. You know, one of the, I think, you know, criticisms of American soccer is that it's so organized all the time. Kids are always playing with adults, that they kind of lose some of the creativity of kids playing like pickup soccer, the way they play pickup basketball. You know, so
My
to,
age in recess, he never plays soccer, he plays all the other sports.
yeah, so,
Do you want to do rep on other sports? And he's like, no. Why not? Play football every time at recess,
Yeah.
which now it's been banned, but.
oh, okay. Yeah, so if it's driven by his love, like that's a very different scenario from, let's say, a father who has a dream of his son playing soccer for the U.S. national team, and so he's signing his kid up for every soccer thing, and you know, it's dad driven, versus where it's just driven by this kid's love, you know.
He does a lot of extra training, but that's on his decision.
Yeah, you just have to write the checks, you know. You know, and that's fine. But like I said, if it comes from him and he seems to be having fun, you know, like if, you know, if you ever see signs of him burning out, like, or it seems like a job, or his like energy's low, or he's getting kind of easily frustrated, then you may need to say, listen, you know, you need a little vacation. I'm going to deflate all the soccer balls for a week, or you know, you go somewhere where there's no soccer. You know, so all love's good. No, really, you know, I mean, that's, you know, all you know, if you love your sport, it's a great experience. It teaches you about like a loving relationship. You know, it's you know, loving relationships don't come easy. You know, and so if you love soccer or you love swimming, you realize, geez, this is what's involved in really loving something, and you realize that sometimes it breaks your heart. You know, I mean, the good thing is your heart heals quickly in sports. You know, but there's a lot of ups and downs. You know, and there's a lot of you know, like I recently, you know, one of my kid had a season-end injury, and he called, and, you know, at 22, and cried on the phone, and I cried with him, and the next day we were both all right. You know, he started, you know, he found out he didn't need surgery, and he started his rehab, but it's, you know, it's a roller coaster. It can be, so. Two people, you go, okay.
So the opposite, if you have a kid that wants to play everything he can and at more of the competitive level, when do you say it's too much, when do you say it's too much?
Well, when you feel burned out, you say it's too much, you know? Like, I'm not driving you here, I'm not driving you there. And it's kind of, it's just like time. There's only so much time, and, you know, it's like little kids get to choose like which candy they want. You know, they can't say both, you know. And it's you know, you choose the sports. Let's say you say you can play this travel sport, you can play on this school team, and if you want to, you know, play basketball, then just play on weekends at the rec building. You know, play pickup basketball. So it's you don't have to always say like yes. You know, you learn to like, okay, as a parent, I get to say no. You know, and you know, but that's a good problem. You know, I mean, there's parents whose kids don't seem interested in anything. You know, and that's kind of, you know, they're trying to figure out like what could my kid be interested in, and you know, so to have a kid who's interested in everything, you just say, well, you know, try this, you know, in terms of organized sports. You know, so does that answer it all?
Yeah.
No, I want to answer it better than this. So what?
I'm trying to figure out how to put this, because half of his coaches are in the room.
That's all right. We're all, we can, it's all right. You can, we can step on each other's toes.
No, I mean, he generally loves to play basketball, soccer, baseball. So right now we're doing 3. Obviously, he's not playing games on all 3 right now because of the season. But, and for now, we can handle it. He's 9, you know, so it's not like every day. So, but when you try to ask him what would you want to pick, he won't pick. Whatever he's playing at the time, he picks. And you go to the next season, he picks the next thing. So, but he loves it. I mean, he generally loves just to play golf. But as a parent, I mean, and we've talked about.
You say play golf?
No, he likes to play all those active sports. And so at what age do you kind of start to, I mean, what do you look for in a kid to say you're doing too much, I guess?
Well, like I say, some of it is are you doing too much and what you're willing to do. You know, like some parents may say, well, I'll do all this, you know. I mean, there's kids on the Wolves whose parents drive them to practice, not just from Grand Rapids. What's the town west of there? You know, they drive 2.5 hours each way to practice. So I think that's totally insane, but some mothers thinks that's fine, you know. So some of it's a judgment call, and some of it becomes like, you don't have to make all the rules of the game because these programs that he's interested in, whether it's soccer, basketball, or baseball, they have the rules of the game, and the rules of the game conflict with each other. So it's like, well, he'll say, I want to play basketball, travel basketball and travel soccer. Well, you can't because, you know, they overlap, and so he'll have to choose, you know, and you can guide him, but, you know, that's kind of what happens is that you have to choose, you know. Like I just got burned out. I said, I'm one travel sport. That's all you get, you know. And I didn't tell them which one they chose. I think it was an obvious choice, and they could play like on the middle school team, and that was it, you know. So, and you were right before you hit it.
Yeah, how do you, at what point when you see a potential in your child, and it comes easy, so I don't need to work that hard, you know, it's a running sport. So if they're like, yeah, I run race, I came in 3rd, Scotty came in 1st, but I really want to try.
Yeah.
How, is there a way that a parent can encourage them to try harder? Or is that something that they've got to develop the love for the sport on their own?
I think so. You know, it's and their coaches, you know, if they get involved, you know, their coaches will be the bad guy or the bad cop, you know, and saying, listen, this is what it takes to succeed, you know, and if you want to put the work in, you know, that's fine, you know, and this is what starts out is there's a lot of talented kids at the younger levels, you know, they're the best in their school, they're the best in, you know, in their township, and maybe they don't have to work that hard, you know, they're just talented, but if you want to keep, you know, the funnel starts narrowing as you get older, and so if you want to play high school sports, or if you want to play college sports or professionally, that you have to be talented and work hard, you know, and not all kids want to do that, you know, and you know, not all kids enjoy the grind. It feels like a grind, but some kids enjoy all the jump rope and push-ups, and you know, they have a need to be successful, you know. So. Oh, you get it. There's no quota.
balance, helping your child understand the commitment, because I think on paper sometimes they're like, oh yeah, I can do that. And then the season starts and you get into the grind of it. And, sorry, you can't go to the slumber party because you have to be somewhere at 7
Yeah.
a.m. the next morning. Like, that part where,
Well, you kind of, you make them, you commit to what you commit to, and at the end of the year, you kind of take notes during the year, and at the end of the year, you say, well, this is what's involved. Now you know. Do you really want to do this again? Are you willing to miss out on slumber parties? Are you willing to, miss out on this? And it's kind of it's a reality, check, What time is it, Sue? I'm just curious how we're doing.
8:10.
Okay. Well, I'm here if there's anything else. You can always, like I say, you can always reach me. I have a little unimpressive website that has my email and phone number, and you can always, reach me that way. I work a lot with parents. Yeah?
What's the website?
It's my name, dansaferstein.com. Just Google Dan Saferstein, psychologist in Ann Arbor. It'll take you there. I also have little books, they're the parenting on will make things close to half. That'll be $5, and the one for student athletes, $10. If you don't have money on you, just take it and send it to me. And like I said, I'm here as a resource, to help your club and help you in any way that I can. Most of my work with younger athletes tends to be shorter usually. It's not like months and months, years and years. Sometimes it's a few sessions, and then we'll check back with me and let me know how things are going. So it's kind of like you plant certain seeds, and usually it's fun work. One thing I like about working with athletes is they're motivated. I'm working with something that's important to them, and it makes it important to me. So I think that's it. Thank you, everyone.